Hey all, welcome back to Now We're Talking with Doug Padgett. My apologies for how long it has been since we have had a podcast. I have been rather busy for the last number of months with a Vote Common Good project, which I hope you know about. If not, go over to votecommongood.com and you'll see that we are organizing, inspiring, and calling religiously motivated voters to do the next right thing on the election on November 3rd, 2020, and to stop this craziness going on with the Trump administration. Just to be done with it already and to move on. And so lots of work. We're going to be touring the entire country, going to every state and to some states that have great importance in the Electoral College and the Senate. We're going to be going there a number of times, so we'd love to take you along with us or join up with you wherever you are. So please take a look over there. And by the way, I'm also going to be putting up a couple of audio pieces from some interviews that I've been doing as a part of that work. One with the New Yorker Radio Hour and one with Politics with Amy Walter. Both podcasts and radio shows that I'm a big fan of, so it was an honor to be on them. So that'll be coming in a week or so. But today, it's all about my conversation with the Reverend Molly Baskette and PhD psychologist Ellen O'Donnell, the Rev and the Doc, they say. And they've written this great book called Bless This Mess. It's a modern guide to faith and parenting in a chaotic world. I'm a big fan of both of theirs. Really excited about this book. I think you're going to love the conversation. And whether you're a parent or not, it's actually an interesting book and an interesting conversation, no matter where you are or not in the parenting flow. So here it is, my conversation with Molly and Ellen, and enjoy. And I'm here with Molly and Ellen. They have written this really great book called Bless This Mess. And it's a book about parenting, but in a lot of ways it's more than that. It's actually about what kind of a world do we want to have, what kind of life are we creating for ourselves, what kind of a world are we making for one another. So Molly and Ellen, thank you. And by the way, a reverend and a doctor, a PhD and a reverend. So the reverend doctor, unless Ellen, you're also a reverend, or Molly, I don't know. Are you also a doctor? Okay, so you
I leave the doctor to her.
Not even a real one, but yes, just a doctor.
Oh, you're real. You're so real.
Don't call me in a medical crisis. But
yes, that is always a thing in the doctoring PhD world, right? Where people are like, well, it's that kind of a doctor. Well, super glad to have you here.
Thanks for having us.
So you've written a parenting book. You want to take on issues of faith, of politics in the broadest sense of the term, how we live with each other, how do we live, about what it means to be progressive people, and how do we raise our children, like really important issues that you both think about a lot. Molly, you're an author, of course, and you've thought about these things a lot. You pastor a church.
Yep.
Out in Berkeley. And Ellen, you work with children and you work in hospital systems, right? As a therapist. So you're in this so deep. Why did the two of you decide that you should combine your superpowers also into writing a book? Like, where did the book part of this come together for the two of you?
Yeah, it came from our friendship.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, say more about that. How long have you known each other?
We've known each other. Our oldest are 15 and 17 now. And we've known each other since Luke was 6 weeks old and Rafe was 2 years old.
Wow.
And Ellen walked into my church on a sweaty summer day. And we were worshiping downstairs because it was too hot in the sanctuary. And I laser focused on her because there were only 3 other children in our church at the time.
Awesome.
Actually 2 other children, and one of them was mine. And I was like, great babies. And not long after that, Ellen put Luke in Rafe's daycare, and we started carpooling, and we started seeing not just each other's Sunday morning dressed up front stage, but a lot of each other's backstage, and kind of seeing each other really vulnerable and, braless and, hot mess in the morning with kids acting up and acting out. And, it's hard often for pastors to be really vulnerable, particularly with their parishioners. We need to have boundaries, and people project a lot of stuff on us, both the good and the ill. And we kind of need to try to live up to their expectations. But I was going through a particularly hard parenting moment when Rafe was 3 and, having ballistic meltdowns, and I was not as patient as I wanted to be. And I was kind of becoming a yeller and a control freak. And Ellen was really a balm for me at that time. I mean, I was a Christian and I thought that was enough. But Ellen gave me a lot of, excuse me, it's only 6 a.m. here in California, so I'm a little froggy still. But Ellen gave me a lot of practical wisdom that she had as a child psychologist, really was what I needed. And Ellen, do you want to speak to the faith side of things?
So I walked into Molly's church being not exactly a lapsed Catholic, although I guess Catholics would have called me a lapsed Catholic because I wasn't attending church anymore. And it was after the sex abuse crisis really broke in the Catholic Church. I'm in Boston, so this was very much the hub of that. I'd gone to Catholic school, kindergarten through college, and my faith in religion had been really formative for me. And when I had my first, Luke, I knew I needed a community to do that for him, but I didn't really know where to go. So I Googled liberal Christian churches.
Seriously.
I saw Molly's face in a rainbow flag, and her church at the time was the first and last one I visited. So
it was God's doing.
Yeah. What year was that?
That was 2004.
I mean, okay, I'm just going to say that's something significant that both you were Googling places to take recommendations in 2004, and Molly, that you had enough of a website in 2004. There's people right now who are thinking maybe I should Google for do a Google search for a church.
I say Google, but was it Google? I don't know, probably, but
it's probably Bing or Yahoo or something.
I think it was Yahoo because the church had a Yahoo group. I remember that.
We did. Well, I was on top of those things.
You were.
You want to grow a church. These things are important. You want to reach young people.
It's the skills the PhD was giving me because I was in graduate school at the time, so I did know how to research. That was the one thing I knew how to do was research. So I was reading a ton of books.
Oh, that's
I was
hilarious.
reading all these parenting books, and I was doing a dissertation on parenting,
Really?
but I wasn't finding anything on kind of a progressive faith tradition to give my kids that fit my family's whole life, our politics, our science, our beliefs, our values, just everything. And so that's what I was really looking for. And I think in those conversations with Molly, when she would ask me for ideas or, I would share what I knew from child psychology, I was always so struck by how the way that Molly talked about values and faith and the way she talked to kids and with kids fit so perfectly with what I knew made for good parenting from child psychology. And, we were both really big fans of Wendy Mogul's Blessing of a Skinned Knee.
Oh, I don't know that book.
So good.
Really?
So good.
She's a Jewish psychologist who was really secular, was sort of Jewish, but then kind of got evangelized to her own faith as an adult and began to apply Jewish teachings in her work as a clinician, as a therapist, and just makes that so available, not just to Jews, but to everyone. And, from right around that age, we were like, we wish there was this for Christians. And we started talking way back when about writing the book for Christians, for progressive Christians. It took us a while, but, that's good because our kids grew up and we got to have kids at every age and stage up through older adolescence. And, everything, it's all been on the job training and sort of putting what we know into the service of other parents and letting all parents overhear our conversation.
And I've heard Wendy say too that she, when she wrote Blessings, she wrote the book that she needed at the time. And that's very much what this book is. It's what we needed then and still now. I mean, I just texted Molly the other night after parent-teacher conferences at the high school saying, I'm trying to practice what I preach. It's the book that we felt like we needed. And we know there are a bajillion parenting books out there. But we really just wanted to do for progressive parents what we felt like Wendy had done for not just Jewish parents, but us too, parents in general. So hopefully it appeals to a wide range of people. But.
So give people a little bit of a picture here of your philosophy of encouraging parents, because there's a lot of there's not only different parenting philosophies, whether you should let your kids, sort of run free, whether you should sort of keep them close, whether you do a family bed or you try to create grit and resiliency, and sometimes they're really counter ideas. So, and then there's everybody's, own family experiences that they're trying to live into or out of or whatever. So there's all that, but then go ahead, Mom.
All the conscious and unconscious stuff we inherit from the way we were parented too, right? So it's all
totally
there in the stew.
Totally. And nothing sort of sharpens that focus quite like last night for a lot of parents, right? Where this is November 1st. That Halloween night is just this clash of 2 or 3 different parenting people in your life, in a kid's life. Which parent says how you should handle Halloween, and then your own issues about candy.
And we're all amped up on sugar, all of us.
And the number of kids that heard the phrase "nothing with red dye in it" last night was, it's the one time a year, right, that you hear that phrase.
I was raised by hippies. I'm still working through my childhood trauma where my dad made me throw away all but 6 pieces of candy and, tried to replace it with carob. And after he went to bed, I'd be going through the nasty, sticky, wet trash, pulling out, every Snickers bar.
Yeah, that's... in this scenario, those are my children, and I'm your dad. So I totally understand that our kids went through it as well. So there's all of that, right? There's all the ways that you how you decide how you're going to be a parent, and people pick and choose, and they change midstream. My wife and I feel like we did that, we sort of shifted somewhere when our kids were little. But then there's this other thing, which I think you guys are really onto, which is the philosophy or the way in which you give advice to parents. And I think one of the genius things about what you're doing in Bless This Mess is that you're actually suggesting a different way for parents to take in input on how they should take input as parents, right? You're working. It's sort of the way that a professor for new college students says, we're going to teach you how to be a college student and how to learn, not just teach you the things that you have to learn. So,
right.
Is that right? I mean, am I on to that? Was that something you were trying to do?
I haven't thought about it in that way, but I love the way that you put it. And I think it's like a college professor, or in a lot of ways, I hope that the way that we're presenting it is the way that I would in therapy, in a room with parents, right? Where it's more about getting to know you and your family and your values and where you're coming from and what you're struggling with, and having kind of a framework to get through the struggles, to make the things that are hard a little bit easier, and to do that in a way that fits with who you are as a family. And there may be techniques, and we give some techniques, but everything comes from a value system and from knowing who you are as a parent, what baggage you're bringing into it from your own childhood,
blind spots you have,
and who your kids are, knowing who are these little beings that you've been given. And so that's definitely where we're trying to come from. And just to say there's no one perfect way or no one right way. And it's okay if you change course midway through your parenting journey or multiple times through your parenting journey.
I mean, it shows that you're growing, and it shows that you have humility, and you're willing to acknowledge the mistakes you've made and do better, and maybe get more on the same page with your co-parent, or you've discovered more about your kid because they're constantly unfolding before us, and you've changed your strategy based on who they really are. One of the most electric moments in writing the book came. So, Ellen described how she would talk about something from a clinical point of view, and then I from a theological. And I've always thought that that science is sort of God working in disguise, and scientific discovery is God's Easter eggs. And it's like God's so delighted when we discover how God put the world together, and we've been able to sort of prove what Jesus or God has asked us to do all along, the way that generosity makes us happier. We're wired for that. And we're also wired for greed in other ways, but we have to sort of overcome those impulses, because generosity is going to actually make us the people we long to be. It's gonna help us grow and be more mentally well and happy. So one of the most electric moments was when Ellen was teaching me about temperament and the research into temperament, which we might call nature, the nature part of nature versus nurture. And it's how God made you, and God made each of us unique. And so we can't have a one size fits all parenting strategy, because we're all so different. And anyone who has more than one kid sees that instantly. Like even bio siblings who share all the same genetic material are so different, and they need different approaches and strategies. And theologically, the second part of the electricity came when I was trying to build a systematic theology of parenting, which I hadn't had. I mean, I did as a Christian, but not as a parent. And everything that I kind of knew directly about parenting from the Bible was either really abusive parenting, or really neglectful parenting when you look at the sort of heroes of the Bible, or, spare the rod and spoil the child, like co-signing corporal punishment. But later in Proverbs, there's a beautiful proverb in 22, I always forget, is it 6 or 16? 22:16, I think. And it's raise the child in their own way, and when old, they will not stray. And often that scripture has been translated, raise the child in the right way, which sounds again like this, here's the way, you better get it right or your kid's ruined. But it's actually a personal pronoun in the Hebrew. It's raise the child in his way. He has a way that God has given him. A colleague of mine likened it to the grain in wood, and it's our job as parents and people who care for children to sort of be curious about what's that grain, really explore it and work with and not against it, so we don't wreck that wood.
Okay, so I want to just ask a couple pieces of advice, having geniuses like you here, for not only myself but others that are around. How does somebody figure out what the way the grain goes in the child, right? I mean, it feels like you're experimenting on children, which, in the science world, they don't let you do. Yeah, right. Like you don't get to do human trials.
Outlawed that.
The FDA says no human trials on on parenting. So how do you suggest parents do this? Yeah. And you can say it's in the book. That's a great answer, right? That people can go to the book, or that you've written about it, because I know you've also done some nice blog content on all this. But also, what if there's another co-parent or multiple co-parents that are also doing this kind of experimentation? Like, how do you figure this out? And I'll just give it. So my wife and I used to have this big disagreement. We were raising our kids about if their behavior that they would engage in sort of regularly was, my view was, these are things they're working out and they're trying and they're going to figure them out and so on. Shelley was more like, I'm a little concerned that this is going to become a permanent character quality, right? That this is going to stay there forever. And we really need to sort of get on this now as opposed to later, right? It's sort of the way that, I think she was maybe more right about that than I was most of the time. I'm not totally sure. I didn't think that in the past, of course, but I think that now. But how do you figure out the way that the kid is supposed to go versus the catastrophic narratives that run in a parent's head where they're like, boy, we can't be experimenting on this little one. Do you have thoughts about that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's both and, right? So for me, the truth is always somewhere in the middle. And I think especially when it comes to parenting, what frustrates me is that we tend to swing on this pendulum from one extreme to another, free range parenting, no helicopter parenting, no snowplow parenting. All the research tells us it's in the middle. It's been there for years and years and years. Telling us that sort of an authoritative style of parenting is what's best for our kids, that it, in addition to respecting kids' temperament, our whole approach is based on something I did not make up. It's well-researched and well-founded, called self-determination theory, that really posits that people are intrinsically motivated to master their environments, to do well, to feel competent, to feel connected to other people, related to other people. And that's really, so when we say we're respecting our kids' autonomy, we don't necessarily mean we're respecting their independence. We mean that we're respecting their self-determination, their right to determine their path.
Oh, that's
but
great.
they do need structure. They need a swaddle around that. So that's where I think it's both and, it's yeah, okay, let's let them try this or go in this direction and see what happens and let them experiment, and be prepared to step in if we feel like, oh, this is veering so far off course that this is dangerous to them or to somebody else. But I really think that what's key in there is, you said, it's so much about parents' anxiety. To be a parent is to be afraid all the damn time.
Yeah. You have a great I think you end the book, right? Doesn't it end with that chapter about worry once and worry well?
Yeah. Well, right? But really, worry once, worry well is a repetitive practice. We're doing it all the time, over and over and over again. And, I talk a lot about, with kids too, who are anxious, about, we can't get rid of our anxiety. We can't get rid of our worries and clear the whole room out, but we can make space around them. We can clean up the room a little and find some wiggle room around them. And I think that's our task as parents, is to make sure that our anxiety and our worry is not the primary driving factor of our parenting or the driving force of our parenting. And we get to know our kids by trying to manage our own anxiety and keep it in check enough that we can really watch our kids and just see them for who they are and what's going on with them. And I can give a million personal examples of that too, but it's not always easy.
Molly, maybe you have something else to say about it, but let me throw this one in there, Ellen, too, because I love that idea of self-determination theory. When you get more than one child in the mix, it gets really complicated. And it feels like sometimes the thing that one child needs for freedom, the other child would feel, frustrating or restraining or something. And the question of that's not, or the statement of that's not fair, seems to be hardwired into children, that they sense that things are not. So how does a person, they've got a co-parent that's got a different idea, they're testing a different theory. What's your thoughts about how, because as progressive parents or people that are progressive, they really do want to start with the child. And I just watch, especially young parents, are like, I have no idea what to do. I feel like we're running 3 or 4 different parenting theories at a time, depending on the child. And so anyway, that's super complicated. Do you have thoughts about that for us progressive people who really do want to lean into the child?
Totally. I think it's a beautiful place where this is exactly, we talk all the time about how progressive spiritual parenting is not an oxymoron. And this is where it dovetails, I think, perfectly into a progressive politics too. Because fair doesn't always mean equal. Yeah. Right. We say that all the time in the political sphere. I love that cartoon of the tall guy and the short guy up on the box.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That applies to our kids too. And that's a message that we talk about, how to kind of cultivate that message in your family and give that message to your kids, that fair doesn't always mean equal. Your brother might need this. Your sister might need that. You guys are unique individuals. And I think if we get, how you're saying, we're doing this over there and that over there. I think that's when we get too caught up in the parenting techniques and the tools and lose sight of the values and the philosophy and the politics, if you want to say that. I mean, however you want to phrase it, but the framework that is guiding our parenting.
A shorthand might be, let your kid be the book that you read. I read a lot of books. I still do. I still look to, the experts to figure out how to do everything. But, let your kid be one of those, be in your canon, because they're going to, I wish I'd known, hindsight's 2020. And a lot of what I know about my kids, I know from a long look backwards. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, when Rafe was 5 and I was teaching him to ride a bike, he got in one go and he was gone, and he was like away across the football field and into traffic. And I was like, no. Whereas Carmen, who's 4 years younger and much more cautious and risk averse, took a lot of tries, and we had to wrap her in bubble wrap. And she's much more of a homebody and needs a tighter swaddle to feel safer, to get, to come into her own freedom. Another shorthand for, the fairness might be, and I don't think young kids can get this developmentally, but I would say it's not fair, but it's just, and to teach them about justice. And I might joke and say, like, we're Marxists in our family, like from each according to their ability to each according to their need. But I think, Jesus and Marx would have had some really interesting conversations about that.
It's very Berkeley of you, by the way, to be yes.
When in Berkeley.
That's right. Okay. So the book's title, which not every author, all the authors get to pick their title. I like yours. It's Bless This Mess. And then that subtitle, which I think really gets after, because this is not the how to organize your house book, right? This is sort of how to organize your family. But
if people buy it by accident thinking we're going to help them organize their house, that's okay. Actually, one of my parishioners who's childless bought it for that reason.
Is that true? Is that true?
I get the royalties either way, sister. It's
That's
cool.
Right. Yeah, that old author line. Don't mind if you read. I don't care if you read it. I just really want you to buy it.
My family keeps buying me all these little signs they're finding at the home goods store. A bless this mess.
Bless this mess.
Your collection, your growing collection.
Okay, so why?
I get it.
So why that title? What were you? And then I want to ask you about the subtitle, because I think it's kind of your thesis. But why the title Bless This Mess?
So one of the original titles was Spare the Rod, like, hey, spare the rod. And but it was too insider baseball, and we really wanted it to appeal broadly to people who, don't necessarily identify as Christian, or, maybe they're Christian, but they don't really know scripture. It was too ironic. And then our next title was Fear Not Parenting, because our amazing agent said a good title is a pain pill, not a vitamin. And who's in more pain than parents? Like, who needs sweet instant relief? But then that just felt like we didn't want fear in the title, even, especially in living through such fearful, anxious times. And then we just got on a call with, I think, our agent and our editor, and we were just kind of like, just riffing, just brainstorming together. And, in the way of the Holy Spirit, it just kind of emerged. Like I got a piece and Ellen got a piece and others got a piece, and it just kind of came together from there.
I think Molly says often that God doesn't need to bless what's already working. So that kind of got in there. And, we very much, in terms of the psychological science and theology too, we feel like we're distilling all of these great ideas and research and science that we've learned about in our careers and in our parenting. And so another idea that we have co-opted and stolen and really guides the book is the idea of good enough parenting, that there is no perfect in parenting. Yeah. And anybody who's sort of selling you the perfect way or the one size fits all solution, it's probably not going to work. Yeah, there's not a lot of research.
Yeah, my friend, and he's a child psychiatrist, did a sermon at a church called "The Gift of the Good Enough Mother," which apparently is a psychological theory. The you need a mother that's good enough, not so good, not so bad, and that good enough parenting has seemed like a real relief. Like
that's exactly where that idea comes from.
Yeah, bless this mess. Okay, so the subtitle: A Modern Guide to Faith and Parenting in a Chaotic World. Like, you're doing something there, right? The modern guide. Maybe that's trying to sort of jump it up into the 21st century, but I think you use that phrase in a particular way, which feels like it has to do with science and spirituality and kind of the progressive thoughts versus the history. Is that what's going on when you call it a modern guide?
That is
absolutely
exactly to get at. Yep.
We tried to get science or psychology in there, and it was just too lumpy and wordy. And it's shocking how often, even in the progressive churches I've served, that people come in thinking we're going to ask them to believe something that's untrue, that we're going to ask them to keep, faith and science at opposite ends of the field, that we're not going to, see them as harmonious. And so that modern day guide was an attempt to harmonize and say, you don't have to leave you can parent with your brain and your heart and your soul here.
And so, as I mentioned, Molly, you're a working pastor, and Ellen, you are a child psychologist at Massachusetts General and a lecturer at Harvard Medical School. So it could be easy to think that, well, one person is the faith side and the other person is the science side. But I didn't have that sense in the book, and I don't really have that sense now. It feels like there's something. It's not like, a reverend and a doctor went into a daycare center, like
right.
some bad bar joke.
Too, actually, a rev and a doc walk into, that was one of our title brainstorms. No, it's not that. And I think, again, that's really those early conversations and the continuing conversations that Molly and I have. It was much more, one of us would say something and the other would be like, yes, that I could have said that. And, and it's funny, a lot of people have asked us how we wrote the book together. How do you write a book with somebody else? And we outlined the book and we sort of picked, okay, you'll take the lead on that. I'll take the lead on this. And then we would swap pieces and tweak them and add to them. And we were really lucky to get to read our own audiobook and spend a week together. And it's funny for me now reading the book, I will read a passage and really not know or remember whose words are whose, because it really, I really feel like this book is one voice and it's our voice. Together and how we complement each other and sometimes joke that now we share a brain. But
yes.
Well, and it's not only that it's not only in the faith world where there's kind of a hold back sort of old thinking that dominates a lot of people's thoughts when they think about faith and parenting. Science can be a little bit stuck as well, right? For a lot of some people think that science is always sort of on the front edge, but that's not true, right? Science, sometimes there's some really bad science ideas about child development and about human thriving and about how what the interaction between parents and children are. Were there some particular long-held science-based parenting ideas that you were really trying to replace when you called this a modern guide?
Yeah. I mean, originally when we were thinking of Spare the Rod, we were going down the direction of corporal punishment is actually still remarkably commonly used as a parenting strategy and technique, even though there is a huge amount of data and research suggesting that it's not helpful and can be harmful. That was kind of watered down a little because we wanted to have a broader appeal. But I think, I guess one other piece that I hope we address, even though we don't tackle it head on, is we've had a lot of very loving, well-meaning grandparents at our talks who bring up the idea that they're concerned that their children, who are now parents, and their generation, are too worried about being friends with their kids. That's sort of shorthand, I think, for permissive.
Too permissive, yeah.
And there's still, in my mind, a lot of confusion about what a permissive parent looks like. And it's not, I think, what a lot of people imagine when they think of that. And I think we can be friends with our kids. But if we're good friends, then we're also telling them the truth and supporting them and not allowing them to make decisions that we know are headed in a bad direction. And that's structure. And so you can be involved and close with your kids and still provide them with structure. We talk about the holy trinity of parenting in the book. Again, not a new idea. It's taken from the parenting literature that kids need autonomy, support, structure, and involvement from their parents. And you're always trying to balance those three things, sort of like a wobbly three-legged stool. It will never be perfect. It'll never be perfectly balanced, but that's kind of what you're aiming for. And that's the balance between corporal punishment and being a kid's friend. It's not that dichotomous. Nothing in the world is that dichotomous.
How about on the faith?
Science tells us that.
How about on the faith side? Was there a big pushback that was hovering above your thinking and your conversations and your writing in the book?
Oh gosh, I'm trying to think.
I mean, we already talked about the raise your child in the way they should go. Here's what that was a bit of a leading question. So here's what I'm getting at.
Lead me.
I know a lot of parents who don't know how to talk about their own faith with their children. So this modern guide to faith and parenting in a chaotic world, the faith and parenting side, man, I mean, parents that I know they're just totally at a loss They're not sure where they are in their own faith. A lot of them have moved into much more progressive space. They're kind of leaving their own faith. And then their kids are like saying, can we talk about God? And they're like, I don't even know what God is. Is God the blanket that religion throws over the mystery to claim it? Like they're, they're into deep, like own their own sense of this, which is really great work.
Crisis.
Yeah. Which is an important part of faith development. And then there's this little one sitting there looking at him saying, Mom or Dad, tell me how the world is. And they're like, oh, geez.
Yeah.
I
they feel like they have to have the answer, but they don't have the answer. And they all, even if they think they might have a guess at the answer, they don't want to impose it on their kid and kind of, what I hear a lot from
or they're afraid they have the wrong answer.
Right. Well, what I hear a lot from progressive parents is, I don't want to indoctrinate my kid.
Totally.
Said, you're not indoctrinating your kid. Like whether they were raised in more fundamentalist traditions or not, there's this fear of giving their kid any structure or answers or framework because it's going to somehow like undermine their kid's own curiosity or thinking. And I say, do you send them to school? Yes, because you value education. Do you think that they're going to believe every single thing every teacher ever teaches them? No, like you're giving them a framework for learning how to think about the world. You're giving them some facts and also helping them become better thinkers. And one of our goals in writing the book is that parents understand themselves as their child's first and best spiritual teacher, even if they go to church, even if they have a fabulous pastor or pastors. They're the ones who are there day in and day out. They're the ones on the car drives when those 4-year-olds ask the amazing mystical questions. The ones who are there when their kids are 12 or 16 and facing really critical moral and ethical decisions as their worlds get bigger and scarier. And so we cannot abdicate our place as parents, right? We have to give them some answers, even if we're struggling and fumbling and not sure we're getting it right. And the more we talk about this stuff with them, the more confident we'll be. And so a lot of what we do in the book is sort of give basics and also say, like when your kid's young, read children's Bibles. We give a couple suggestions of our favorite children's Bibles. Christianity really is not rocket science. It's a story-based tradition. Stories are easy to remember. Most progressive parents are, we've been to liberal arts colleges. We're trained critical thinkers. We can wonder about texts. We can imagine truths about them. And we can do that alongside our children in ways that yield some answers and lead us further into the mystery.
Yeah.
I think it's another place where it dovetails with science. I think what I realized in writing the book and in talking with Molly and now in feedback on the book is something that bugs me a lot is I think we really underestimate kids. We think that they can't handle that wondering or they can't handle it if we say, I don't know, or this is what I believe and this is what some people believe. And Molly and I both had the great fortune and privilege of being parented in ways that allowed for that wondering and questioning. I say I did grow up very, very Catholic, but I also had, a grandma who would sit and wonder about whether or not heaven and hell really existed and where was Hitler when he, and I was in 6th grade.
Just great conversations with the child. Heaven, hell, Hitler,
Over spaghetti and meatballs.
Right.
She knew I could do that. And she knew, we talk in the book about scaffolding, again, another concept in child development and psychology that we didn't make up. It's well-researched that our job is to scaffold our kids' development, not to overwhelm them or give them more than they can handle, but to challenge them to that next level of development. And I think we do that by wondering with them and hearing what they have to say. And I think I do have empathy and a lot more understanding, I think, now in talking with parents who have come from more fundamentalist backgrounds about why that feels so threatening to sort of put that to their children, that there's this tension between not wanting to indoctrinate them at all and not wanting to overwhelm them with how scary it can feel to not have the answers, right? Because you were brought up being told there are answers and now suddenly like, wait, there aren't. But
and it dovetails, doesn't it, with this whole with this whole temperament question. There's some kids who thrive in the mom doesn't know, dad doesn't know, this is exciting. And that for other kids, you can see this, it scares them.
Yeah. They want us to be omniscient and we are their gods. We're not just their first spiritual teacher. We are their gods early on.
Yeah,
but it goes back to the not one size fits all, right? Scaffolding looks like one thing for one kid and a little bit different for another kid.
Yeah. And this also really, and the book is great, even if somebody's thinking, well, I kind of know what I'm doing with parenting. Generally, like I have a parenting philosophy, because it really asks it primes the parent to be a person in this system and not primarily a parent. Right. That's one of the hard things for parents, is that parenting is actually a person's work. It's not that role that we have, that relational role is not. And I think you really do that well. Would you say that this book is as much for the development of the parent as a person as it is for the development of the skills or the techniques of being a parent?
Absolutely. I mean, Molly said, parents are their kids' first and best spiritual teachers. Well, our kids are our spiritual teachers, right?
Amen.
They're teaching every day to think about things differently. And parenting is a spiritual practice. And so we talk about that a lot in the book too, about how parenting in this way might change you.
Okay. So here's a sensitive one. You're both moms, and you're women. And a lot of people who buy parenting books are women. A lot of people who talk about parenting are women. A lot of people who see themselves first as a parent are women. Men tend to see themselves as their parenting second or third or fourth in the way they understand themselves. Any advice for people who are trying to figure out how to parent as males, whether they're in, same-sex couples that are both males, or there's a male around, or a woman that's married to a man is trying to figure out, he doesn't think about parenting. It's anything in here, or any advice you have for either the men trying to figure out parenting as a function role. And I don't know if you have thoughts about that biologically or genetically or culturally, what's going on, but it seems like it's a different experience for men and for women.
I think
go ahead, Al.
Quickly from a science perspective, I think a lot of times men do think about these things a lot, but they don't necessarily feel safe to talk about them, right? That those are two different things, that they do think about their role as a father and their relationships with their kids and what that's going to look like long term, or what if, we need to divorce, and what's that going to mean for my role in my family and with my kids? I think they think about those things a lot, but I don't think there are many safe spaces to talk about them or be in community with them. And it is hard because we can only write from the perspective that we come from, which is being hetero, cisgender, white women. But I hope that dads can pick up the book and apply some of the tools and the process, and maybe just get dads talking. I will say we've had a lot of, even Molly, I don't know what you think, but I feel like we've had a lot of feedback from grandpas.
Really?
We've had a lot of grandpas. Yeah. Grandpas are not afraid to share their opinions in our book talks.
They probably, I can't imagine that they felt in their generation of parenting that they got a lot of say or a lot of room.
Oh,
and
that hadn't occurred to me.
They're feeling like, hey, now it's my chance or what? But I think we've got to create more spaces for those conversations.
Yeah.
I'm again a new grandfather, and I feel that very deeply, actually. Like, hey, it's a whole thing in and of itself about how grandparents sort of, because you get all the benefits and not the pressure. I don't know. It's a different,
and you have more perspective, from your own parenting and the mistakes you've made, and
But you also have all the worry and a lot less control, I say. You have all the worry and a lot less control to do anything about it. And that's a whole other thing for grandparents.
Yeah. Well, hey, the book is called Bless This Mess, A Modern Guide to Faith and Parenting in a Chaotic World. It's worth every minute that you would spend reading it and sharing it and buying it. So, Molly and Ellen, thank you so much.
Thank you, Doug. So great
really
to see you. Thanks for having us on.
Right on.